They used my name to plan a luxury wedding, then told me not to wear anything that stood out. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even included. But every flower, every plate, every guest at that vineyard, they were there because of me. It started innocently enough. My sister Lauren had always loved being the center of attention, and when she got engaged, she announced it like a celebrity press release. Glittery photos, dramatic captions, a full Pinterest board within 24 hours. I was happy for her. I really was. So when she called and asked if I could help a little with planning, I said yes. "Ava, you're amazing at this kind of thing," she gushed. "You basically have a superpower for events. I just want it to feel really curated, you know?" I did know. I've worked in executive operations for 8 years, which means I've managed boardroom retreats, corporate galas, and luxury team offsites. Planning a family wedding? Light work. I cleared my weekends, took notes, built a full project timeline. I even gave her my vendor list, people I'd built relationships with through hard work and trust. And just like that, the phone calls began. "Ava, can you handle flowers? You know that French boutique florist in Sonoma?" "Ava, can you talk to the caterer? I want an all-vegan tasting menu, but elevated." "Ava, can you check the vineyard contract? They're giving us some kind of deal, but I don't get the legal stuff." I was on every thread, every call, every group chat, except the actual guest list. When the formal invitations went out, mine never came. I told myself it was a mix-up, a glitch in the mail, a delay. I didn't ask. I didn't want to seem petty. But then, at one vendor meeting, something shifted. "We're so thrilled to host the Rhodes family wedding," the vineyard manager said to me, "and thank you again, Ava, for facilitating this partnership. Your name goes far in our industry." My name? I looked at the contract. My business email was listed as the primary liaison. My signature was on the original request letter. Lauren hadn't just asked for help. She'd told them I was managing the event on her behalf, and used my name to negotiate discounts and exclusive access. When I asked her about it later that evening, she waved it off. "Oh my God, Ava, don't be dramatic. It's not like I was pretending to be you. You just streamline things. You're amazing. Everyone loves working with you. This way, we all win." Number. We didn't all win. She was getting a $40,000 wedding for half the price. I was getting overlooked. Still, I convinced myself it would be worth it, that she'd say something kind during her toast, that I'd get a seat at the family table, that someone, anyone, would say thank you. But the cracks got wider. A week before the wedding, I got a group text labeled Bridal Logistics. I wasn't on it originally. Someone forwarded it to me. Inside was a list of everyone's responsibilities. My name was under gift table management and vendor troubleshooting. I replied, "Am I working this wedding?" Lauren responded, "You're not working, Ava. You're just helping things run smoothly. You're the calm energy we need. Please don't make this weird." 2 days later, the photographer emailed me about setup logistics. "Bride said you'll be early to help stage the gift area and direct delivery vans," she wrote. "Let me know what time you'll arrive." Still, no mention of attire, no seating assignment, no confirmation of an RSVP. When I finally called Lauren to ask what I should wear, she paused. Then she said it. "Just don't wear anything too bold, okay? We want the focus on the wedding party. Maybe something neutral? And maybe don't hang near the photo areas. It'll confuse people." I hung up without saying a word. My hands were shaking. My heart wasn't broken. It was bruised, slow and deliberate, like a stone pressed into soft earth. That night, I sat in the parking lot of the vineyard, the same place I had helped them book. I looked up at the balcony where the bridal suite lights were already on. Somewhere inside, my sister was probably practicing her vows, maybe even laughing with her friends about how extra I was being. And me? I was outside, like I'd always been, holding the pieces, smoothing the details, taking up just enough space to be useful, but not enough to be remembered. They didn't forget me. They erased me, on purpose. But the one thing they didn't count on was that I had options too. And that night, I texted someone who owed me a favor. By the morning of Lauren's wedding weekend, I had stopped expecting gratitude. What I hadn't stopped receiving were vendor messages. At least a dozen of them flooded my phone before I even got out of bed. The florist wanted final confirmation on centerpieces, the event coordinator needed the updated seating chart, and the photographer, confused, was looking for the name of the person in charge of the gift table. The name they all had was mine. The role they assumed I played was one of control, reliability, authority. But in the eyes of my sister, I was something else entirely. An unpaid extra who had somehow wandered into the spotlight. She still hadn't said thank you. Not once. I stood in front of the closet, staring at the neutral-toned dress someone had couriered to my apartment 2 days earlier. No note, no card, just a beige, shapeless garment that screamed, "Stay invisible." I slipped it on anyway, like armor, and headed to the vineyard. The drive was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums too loudly inside your chest. I kept thinking about the absurdity of it all. How I had curated half this wedding, negotiated the vineyard contract, hand-picked the floral designer, yet didn't even have a seat at the table. I wasn't invited. I wasn't wanted, but I was still responsible. The vineyard looked breathtaking, of course. I had made sure it would. Golden morning light spilled across polished wine barrels and vintage string lights, illuminating every corner of the venue like a promise. The string quartet was warming up beneath a white canopy as servers aligned crystal glasses along the tables. Lavender and eucalyptus arrangements bloomed on cue. It was perfect, curated, high-end, but none of it acknowledged my name. As I stepped onto the venue grounds, the coordinator rushed to meet me with a clipboard and wide eyes. "Thank God you're here, Ava." The bride's stressed. She says the eucalyptus is too green and that you'll know what to do. I didn't even pause to respond. I walked through the staff corridor and entered the bridal suite from the back. Inside, Lauren was mid-laugh, surrounded by women in matching satin robes, holding mimosas and curling irons. She glanced at me, barely. "Hey, Ava, can you go check the altar spray? It's not photographing well." That was it. No welcome, no hello, not even a real look. It hit me harder than I expected. She didn't need me anymore. Not as a person, just as a lever, a switch, a problem solver she didn't have to see. I nodded and left without a word. I didn't check the altar spray. I didn't adjust the floral arch. Instead, I made my way to the far wing of the estate, the section labeled Additional Staff. That was where they had decided I belonged. A converted prep room with a window, a creaky folding chair, and a fan that barely worked. Inside, I found a printed packet with my name on the cover. It was a wedding operations folder, the kind I used to create for corporate retreats. Inside were timelines, delivery logs, vendor contacts, all compiled from my own Google Drive. Someone had lifted my event planning template and filled in every detail I had emailed over the last 4 months. There were handwritten notes, too. Check with Ava before finalizing. Ava to confirm with Vineyard. Ask Ava to approve. Page after page, I was listed as the point of contact, and yet I was nowhere in the seating chart. My phone buzzed again. It was the photographer. "Hey, Ava, bride said you'll help line up the family for portraits. Can we get them now?" I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "Sure," I typed, but I didn't move. I just sat there, holding that packet, heart pounding with the kind of rage that grows not from an explosion, but from erosion. Tiny cuts, daily dismissals, kindness twisted into expectation. I stood up and stepped outside the suite. From the overlook, I could see the entire wedding unfold. Guests were beginning to arrive in linen and pastel, sipping wine, admiring the view. Somewhere below, my mother was probably directing people away from asking about me. I wasn't on the guest list. I wasn't on the bridal website. I didn't even have a place card. I walked farther until I reached the vineyard's quietest point, a shaded bench that faced the hills and the ceremony platform. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't touched in a year. Beatrice, daughter of the vineyard's founder, former panel speaker, brilliant, formidable, and in the middle of restructuring her family's estate. We had met through a business conference I hosted in San Francisco. 6 weeks ago, she'd reached out with a private offer, one that involved silent investment, co-management, and future equity in the very property where Lauren's wedding was now taking place. I hadn't responded immediately. At the time, I was still hopeful that this wedding might shift something between my sister and me, but that hope had eroded too. I tapped call. She picked up on the second ring. "Ava?" "I'm in. I'll sign today." There was a pause, then a soft exhale on the other end. "Good. I'll meet you at the cellar in 30. We'll announce it tonight." I hung up and leaned back on the bench. My dress clung uncomfortably to the back of my knees. From this angle, the vineyard looked like something from a dream, perfectly lit, symmetrical, curated. My sister's dream, but not her work. Tonight, the family would toast to Lauren. They'd call her graceful, visionary, accomplished. But as the wine flowed and the music swelled, they would learn something else too. That everything around them, the vineyard, the vendors, the vision, was shaped by the sister they'd worked so hard to erase. The ceremony was set for golden hour, and the vineyard looked like it had been plucked from a bridal magazine spread. Rows of white wooden chairs faced the altar, draped in champagne-colored fabric, eucalyptus garlands cascading down like a soft green waterfall. Strings of fairy lights twinkled under the canopy of oak trees as the sun began its slow descent behind the hills. From a distance, everything looked perfect, immaculate, intimate. But like most things in my family, the surface was just a distraction from what lay beneath. I had changed into a different dress, not the beige thing they sent me. This one was mine. A tailored, deep sapphire wrap dress I had packed on instinct. Maybe somewhere inside, I had known I wouldn't be welcomed as a sister, that I'd need to dress like something else, something untouchable. I didn't wear it to stand out. I wore it to belong to myself. As I stepped toward the ceremony area, the coordinator spotted me and jogged over, flushed and frantic. "Ava, hey, She looked around awkwardly. "Lauren's mom said you should stand off to the side, over there by the wine barrels, not in the main aisle." There it was. No invitation, no seat, just an awkward nod to presence without acknowledgement. I didn't react. I simply walked toward the space they hadn't reserved for me and stood still, watching as guests filled in rows with place cards that didn't include my name. I saw my cousin walk by and do a double-take when he saw me. I saw my aunt whisper something into her husband's ear while pointing discreetly in my direction. I didn't care. The dress hugged me like armor. My silence was sharper than any outburst. When the music began, the chatter dissolved into reverent quiet. The officiant took his place. Then the bridal party began to walk down the aisle, each bridesmaid in pale rose chiffon, each groomsman in matching navy suits. They smiled, posed for phones, performed. I watched them all, not with envy, but with a strange detachment, like I was watching a scene from a life I had long since stopped auditioning for. Then Lauren appeared. She looked radiant, the kind of beautiful that costs 5 figures and 6 months of fittings. Her veil billowed behind her like a magazine shoot come to life. She walked slowly, arm linked through our father's, eyes shining, not with tears, but with triumph. I knew that look. It wasn't about love, it was about control. Her dream was unfolding in real time, and she was the center of every gaze, except mine. Because as she walked, I noticed the subtle twitch of her fingers gripping the bouquet, the way her eyes briefly scanned the front row, the flicker of annoyance when she spotted the coordinator giving someone new instructions, me, standing upright near the wine barrels, not hiding, not crying, just watching. She looked away quickly. The ceremony was brief. Vows written in curated romanticism, a joke about meeting at a charity gala, a shared glance as the officiant declared them husband and wife. The crowd applauded. Someone whistled. Champagne was passed. But none of it felt real to me. It felt like theater, like everyone had memorized their lines except me. The photographer, still assuming I was in charge, tapped my shoulder. "We'll need the family over here for post-ceremony shots." I gave him a tight smile and replied, "I don't think I'm in the family set." He hesitated. "Really?" The bride said. I cut him off gently. She didn't say. She never does. And then a voice behind us. "She's right," Lauren said, walking toward us with her new husband. "Ava can take some with the vendors if she wants." Her tone was light, sweet even, but her eyes held something darker, territorial. I looked at her for a long second. Not angry, not hurt, just done. Then I smiled, nodded, and stepped back. "Sure, vendors," I said. "I'll join the people who made this happen." She flinched, just slightly. As the guests filtered into the cocktail hour, I slipped away. Not to sulk, not to run, but to meet Beatrice. We'd agreed to finalize the documents just before the reception. I found her waiting in the wine cellar, dressed simply but with unmistakable authority. She greeted me like a partner, not an outsider, not a placeholder. We signed everything within 15 minutes. That vineyard, the land, the brand, the legacy, was no longer just the backdrop to my erasure. It was mine. I didn't need a toast or a microphone. I didn't need a spotlight. I had something better. Leverage. When I returned to the reception area, the sun had fully set, and the tent was glowing from within. Music floated into the air. Laughter, clinking glasses. My mother was already tipsy, red in the face, holding court with a group of old friends. Lauren's new in-laws were gushing about the view, the food, the venue. One of them turned to me casually and said, "Your sister really picked a magical place." I smiled. "She really did," I replied. "It's even more magical once you know the story behind it." They nodded, distracted, unaware of what I meant. But that was the beauty of it. No need to shout. I just had to wait, because sometimes the most powerful revenge is being the calm in the storm you created, and soon everyone would feel the shift in the air, the kind of shift that only happens when the woman they dismissed owns the ground beneath their feet. I didn't expect him to come. Not really. When I sent the invitation, it was more an act of memory than hope, a nod to the version of me that once believed in showing up for people, even when they didn't return the favor. But when the town car pulled up outside the vineyard at exactly 7:43 p.m., 13 minutes before the first dance, I knew. Something was about to shift. His name was Marcus Delaney. Not the Marcus who dated my sister. Not some ghost from a complicated past. Marcus was the kind of man who could walk into any room, any family function, any glass-walled boardroom, and somehow command gravity. A clean navy suit, open collar, confidence so quiet it almost whispered, and a gaze that read situations like code. He stepped out of the car, spotted me across the reception tent, and offered a look, not a smile, not a question, just confirmation. "I'm here," it said, "on purpose." Heads turned before he even reached me. My mother narrowed her eyes like she was scanning for a missing family tree branch. My aunt paused mid-sip of wine. Even Lauren, radiant in her bridal afterglow, looked up from across the tent and froze. She had always hated being surprised, especially by something, or someone, she couldn't control. "You came," I said simply, standing up from the corner of the bar where I'd been quietly sipping a very expensive Pinot Noir. "You asked," he replied, taking in the scene with the clinical detachment of a man used to walking into closed rooms and rewriting their terms. We hadn't spoken much in 2 years. A few texts, a forwarded article, a one-word reply when my name was listed in an industry award shortlist. But there was something unspoken between us. Always had been. Not romantic, not exactly. Just aligned. We'd once led a crisis operations team together, flew across 7 cities in 8 weeks, negotiated with men who built empires and refused to sign NDAs. We never flirted. Never crossed lines. But I trusted him. And that trust, tonight, was everything. He took my glass gently, sipped it without asking, then handed it back. "You look like someone who just pulled off a hostile takeover without breaking a nail," he said. I smiled for the first time in hours. The DJ was announcing the first dance. Lauren and her husband moved to the center of the floor as the string lights dimmed and a slow ballad filled the air. The photographer circled like a moth, capturing angles and glances. Guests oohed and awed at the perfect pairing, the perfect moment, the perfect bride. But my gaze wasn't on them anymore. It was on the ripple, because Marcus's presence created one. We walked toward the tent together, not fast, not trying to make a scene, but people noticed. That's the thing about quiet power, it draws attention louder than a scream. The moment we stepped under the canopy, a row of in-laws turned. A bridesmaid stopped mid-sentence. The best man glanced down awkwardly at his cufflink. It wasn't just the fact that I wasn't supposed to have a +1, it was that he didn't fit their mold. He wasn't family, he wasn't a college friend, he wasn't on anyone's guest list. He was with me. Lauren's new mother-in-law leaned toward my mom. I saw the whisper, I saw the raised brows, but Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned closer and whispered in my ear, "This is one of those events where people care more about perception than presence." I nodded. And where I used to think I needed their perception to have a presence. He turned to look at me then. Really look. You're past that. You built this. You don't need their seat. They're in your venue. And just like that, something realigned inside me. Not in a dramatic crash of confrontation, not in a shout or a toast or a speech, just alignment, ownership. I wasn't trying to be accepted anymore. I wasn't waiting to be introduced. I didn't need permission to exist here. As the music changed and the dance floor opened, Marcus extended a hand. "Let's dance." I hesitated for just a breath, because my sister was watching, because this was still her night, because somewhere deep inside, a part of me still wanted not to ruin it for her. But then I remembered. She had already ruined so much for me, silently, smiling, in the name of family harmony. And I wasn't here to disrupt her wedding. I was here to stop disappearing in it. So I placed my hand in his and stepped onto the dance floor. The music wasn't slow, but it wasn't fast either. It had rhythm, movement, a pulse that felt almost cinematic. We didn't dance like people trying to prove something. We danced like people who knew who we were. And slowly, the crowd shifted. Attention moved, murmurs started, people noticed. The narrative cracked. I caught Lauren's face as we passed by her side of the floor. Her smile faltered. Just for a second, just long enough for the cameras to miss, but not long enough for me to forget. This wasn't her dream anymore. This was my scene now. The thank you speech started exactly 10 minutes after the cake was cut. The string lights flickered gently overhead, and the vineyard had taken on that dreamy glow people pay thousands to photograph. Lauren stood with her husband beneath the arched trellis, the microphone held like a trophy between her fingers. Her voice, polished and rehearsed, floated through the tent like a song composed to sound spontaneous. "We want to thank everyone who helped make this day so magical," she said, pausing for applause. "To my incredible bridesmaids, our families, the vendors, the venue team. You all made this a day we'll never forget." I stood near the back of the tent, beside the sommelier station. Marcus, ever observant, leaned in slightly and murmured, "Let's see if the woman who built the vineyard even gets a footnote." I didn't respond. I already knew the answer. Lauren continued, weaving gratitude like lace. The DJ, the photographer, even the cousin who handled the seating chart last minute. Every name was a layer of curated affection. But mine never came. There was no mention of Ava, no nod to the sister who designed the signature wine label, who rescued the event when the original venue flooded 6 months ago, who had spent 2 years turning the vineyard into a sought-after destination. She ended the speech with a toast to family, legacy, and love. I almost laughed. Not bitterly, just clearly. Because that's what the evening had been, a beautifully executed fiction. And I was done being a background character in someone else's screenplay. I walked away quietly, down the gravel path behind the main tent, where crates of backup glasses and uneaten appetizers were stacked in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, staring up at the stars, trying to poke through the vineyard canopy. Then I felt Marcus's presence before I heard his footsteps. He didn't say anything right away. Just stood beside me, close but not crowding, letting the silence settle between us like truth. Finally, I turned to him. "She thanked the flowers," I said, tone level, "but not the soil." "That's what people do," he replied. "They forget the ground they're standing on was once shaped by someone they don't see anymore." I looked back toward the tent. The music had returned. People were laughing again, dancing, drunk on curated joy. "I don't want revenge," I said softly. "No," Marcus said, "but you do deserve presents." He handed me something then, a folded card. "What's this?" "Your own toast," he said, "from someone who knows what you actually did here." I opened the card. It was handwritten, brief, elegant, just a few lines of acknowledgement. From Marcus, yes, but it was more than that. It was documentation, not praise, not apology, just recognition, the rarest currency in my family. I smiled, tucked the card into my clutch, and walked back toward the reception. I didn't take the mic. I didn't interrupt anything. I simply waited until the last group of guests was leaving and passed near the photo wall Lauren had set up with string lights and Polaroids of her and her husband. A massive chalkboard sign above it read, "Our story begins here." And that's where I did it. I slipped one photo in, a single Polaroid Marcus had snapped earlier, of me standing near the barrels, silhouetted by the vineyard light. Below it, I wrote in silver pen, "This place didn't begin with their story. It began with mine." I didn't stick around for reactions. By the time Lauren noticed, I was already on the road out, the gravel under our rental's tires cracking like an old bridge being left behind. I didn't need her response. I didn't need a phone call or confrontation or gasp. I had given them something else. A reminder. Because legacies aren't built on speeches, they're built on what endures after the music fades. The morning after the wedding, my phone buzzed non-stop, not from family, not from Lauren, but from notifications, tags, pings from people I hadn't spoken to in years. A local lifestyle magazine had already published a photo spread titled, "Inside Napa's Most Elegant Vineyard Wedding of the Year." And there, leading the carousel, was a full-width image of me. Not the bride, me. Standing on the vineyard terrace, head tilted, eyes cast toward the horizon like I belonged to the place. Because I did. Except they hadn't mentioned that. The caption beneath the photo read, "A guest gazes across the vineyard during cocktail hour." A guest. No name. No role. No reference to the fact that the view she gazed upon, the vines, the rows, the lighting, all existed because of her work. I clicked through the article. It was a love letter to Lauren and Ben's vision, praising their tasteful restraint and commitment to elegance. It applauded the vineyard's architecture, the subtlety of the varietals, the aged oak interiors. But again, no mention of who curated that experience, no interviews with the estate owner, no nod to the woman who made the venue desirable in the first place. It wasn't just omission, it was co-opted credit. My image was being used as a brand enhancer, while my name was left out of the conversation entirely. That's when I called Mel. Melanie Ortega was a culture and events columnist who owed me a favor. 2 years ago, when her team's planned venue had a last-minute fire code issue, I reworked the entire back section of Langston Estate to accommodate her magazine's gala, and did it in 36 hours. She hadn't forgotten. When I reached her, I didn't complain. I didn't vent. I just asked if she wanted the real story behind Napa's Most Elegant Vineyard Wedding. She hesitated only long enough to sip her coffee before saying, "Email me the pitch. I'll make it run." That afternoon, the article went live. Headlined, "Behind the Vineyard, Meet the Woman Who Designed the Wedding Without an Invitation." It wasn't vengeful. It was precise. It explained how Langston Estate came to be, how Lauren requested the venue, how every detail was touched by a silent architect no one had mentioned, until now. I didn't attack my sister. I didn't call out names or post private texts. I simply stated facts. Let people do with them what they would. But in the days that followed, something shifted. Vendors began tagging me. "Styled this table for at Langston Estate, one of the best in the valley." Florists and photographers who had previously ignored my name started weaving it into their credits. The planner who had tried to nudge me off the planning thread suddenly issued a public thank you post for behind-the-scenes collaboration, and clients, old and new, flooded my inbox asking to book. The image they had used to reduce me to a passive attendee? It became the signature of my next chapter. Marcus, as always, said it best. They used you to add elegance to their story. You reclaimed it and wrote your own. I didn't need Lauren to apologize. I didn't need the family to circle back with a late thank you. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I was making my presence visible, whether they named it or not. The photo from the article, the one where I'm standing against the vineyard light, became the cover of Langston's fall campaign. Not because I wanted the attention, but because I wanted control over how my image was used, over what stories it supported. Lauren sent a message eventually. A short one. I saw the article. I didn't mean to leave you out. Everything was just so overwhelming. Hope we're okay. I didn't respond. Not out of malice. Out of clarity. Because this wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about authorship. Of my life. My legacy. My labor. And for the first time in years, the narrative belonged to me. 2 weeks after the wedding, a thick ivory envelope arrived at my office. At first, I thought it was a belated thank you card. Not that I needed one, but I had started to believe Lauren might surprise me. Maybe she'd finally realized the weight of everything I held together. Maybe she'd sat with the silence that followed her speech and decided to step out of the spotlight, even for a moment, to reach toward me with something honest. But when I opened the envelope, I found something else entirely. An invoice. Not addressed formally, no introduction, no letterhead, no personal note, just a printed list on plain paper, an itemized breakdown of wedding costs labeled Langston Estate Settlement. It included everything from vendor parking fees to additional overtime hours for vineyard staff. Some charges were valid, hours worked, cleaning costs, shuttle adjustments. Others, they were inflated or outright fiction. An emergency weather contingency tent I never approved, a bonus line item for the planner Lauren hired, someone who never once coordinated with me directly, and at the bottom of the page, in bold, total due, $14,720. I stared at it for a long minute, then turned to the email it had come with. Just 2 sentences from my mother. Since the estate was part of the family's contribution, we assumed this could be settled through Ava. Hope that's okay. No signature, no warmth, not even punctuation after my name. That was the moment everything sharpened. This wasn't forgetfulness, this wasn't chaos, this was structure, decades of it, the way things had always worked in our family. Ava builds the house, they hang the photos. Ava pays the bills, they drink the champagne. Ava makes the world easier, quieter, more presentable, and then disappears before the applause. Not this time. I didn't rage. I didn't send an email in all caps or schedule a confrontational call. I forwarded the invoice to Marcus with a single line. Can you respond with the revised terms? His reply within the hour was a masterpiece. Dear Langston Family Coordination Team, please note that per the standard lease agreement for Langston Estate, applicable to all events hosted on premise, no external party may submit a retroactive charge to the estate owner without prior written agreement. Furthermore, as this event was hosted at no charge, all incurred costs were extended as a professional courtesy. That courtesy has now expired. In future, any further requests, financial or otherwise, should be directed through my office. Best, Marcus Fulton, Estate Manager, Langston Holdings. It wasn't just a response, it was a line in the sand, and it carried weight. That night, Lauren called me. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Ava, I just saw the message from Marcus. I didn't know he'd speak like that. You sent me a bill, I said calmly, after removing me from every speech, every article, every conversation, and you sent it without asking. It wasn't meant like that, she insisted. Mom just thought, I'm not Mom, I cut in, and you're not a guest at my estate, not anymore. Silence. I wanted the wedding to feel like a family event, she finally said, voice brittle. It did, I replied, just not for me. I hung up. And for the first time since the engagement announcement, I felt weightless. Not because I'd punished anyone, not because I'd won, but because I had spoken plainly. I had said no without apology. I had chosen my boundary over their expectations. The next morning, I walked the vineyard with Marcus. The autumn leaves were curling into amber at the edges, the grapes had been harvested, and the quiet held its own kind of majesty. "You did the right thing," he said as we stopped at the overlook, the same one from the photo now making its rounds online. "You didn't burn the bridge, you just stopped carrying it." I nodded. "And if they want to cross, they can build their own path." It came quietly, like most lasting things do, not through family acknowledgement, not through a sudden apology, but through a real estate blog. It wasn't even meant to be about me. The headline read something like, "California's Iconic Estates and the Women Who Designed Them," and I didn't even know it existed until one of my junior coordinators forwarded it with a line that simply read, "You've got to see this." I clicked out of obligation, half expecting some glossy fluff piece about Napa weddings, but there I was, dead center in the spread, standing beside the Langston Estate sign, not even looking at the camera. The photo must have been taken during a tasting event months ago, back when the vineyard still smelled like fresh ferment and summer heat. But the caption? It floored me. Ava Langston, designer and curator of one of Napa's most emotionally resonant venues, quietly changed the landscape of luxury events. I blinked twice, then I read it again. There it was, credit, no edits, no omissions, no borrowed narrative to be used later by someone else, just my name, where it should have been all along. That article spread like fire in late October. Within 24 hours, Langston Estate received over 70 new booking inquiries. A well-known wine editor requested an exclusive interview. A popular event influencer with nearly 800,000 followers posted an unsolicited, "This is how you do it," reel set to soft jazz with footage of my estate. By the third day, the Napa County Council reached out directly to request permission to feature Langston Estate on its Architectural Heritage Tour. And then they asked something else. Would I accept a bronze commemorative plaque to be placed on the entry gate? I sat with the email for a while, just staring at the request. My name, etched into metal. Not because I demanded it, but because the work itself had become undeniable. Not even the family could erase what had taken root now. I said yes. There was no ceremony, no press or photographers, just a quiet team of municipal workers, a small truck, and a stoneworker named Theo, who had worked on several heritage sites across the valley. He nodded politely and told me it would take less than an hour. I didn't need anything grand. I only stood there to watch it happen. Not because I needed proof, but because I wanted to feel the moment fully. The sign wasn't large, maybe the size of a hardback book. Clean and minimalist. Just brushed bronze mounted into limestone, set off to the side of the estate's gate, where the ivy would never grow thick enough to cover it. It read, Langston Estate. Designed and curated by Ava Langston. Established 2019. No fanfare, no flourish, just truth. Subtle, permanent truth. Lauren found out 2 days later, and not from me. Someone at the wedding, a friend of hers I think, posted a carousel on Instagram. Pictures from the vineyard, the ceremony, the cake. But the first image? It was the gate, and the plaque was visible, just off to the side, catching golden light as the sun dipped. The caption said, "Such a stunning day." Even cooler that it was at her sister's place, that tag was the matchstick. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with Lauren's name. I didn't answer. She called again, then texted, "You put your name on the estate gate?" I stared at the message for a moment, then typed a single word in return. "Yes." She didn't reply. And honestly, I didn't expect her to. For people like Lauren, the silence after being confronted with an inconvenient truth is the closest they come to introspection. But I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel victorious. I felt resolved. Seen in a way that didn't require translation. The estate was mine, the vision, the sweat, the weekends spent arguing with contractors about light angles and soil pH. None of it was shared. So the credit didn't need to be either. That evening, I walked the perimeter of the vineyard with Marcus. The sun painted everything amber. You could smell the ripening in the soil, the shift in the air as summer handed the world to fall. We paused by the plaque. He didn't say much at first, just looked at it with a small smile, and then at me. "Do you feel lighter?" he asked. "No," I replied after a moment. "But I feel anchored, like I finally claimed space I'd spent years pretending not to need." He nodded, and for a while we just stood there in the hush of the vines. No shouting, no proving, just permanence. In the days that followed, the estate took on a new energy. Visitors would pause at the gate longer. Some posed beside the sign, others asked about the story behind it. One bride even said she booked the venue specifically because of the name on that plaque. "I wanted a place built by someone who understands elegance without ego," she told me. I smiled politely. But inside, something bloomed. This wasn't just recognition, it was legacy. The thing about weddings, especially luxury weddings, is that the bill always comes after the beauty. The laughter fades, the champagne's gone, the vows already posted online. But the invoices, those stay. And if you were smart, or in my case methodical, you kept the paper trail clean and undeniable. That's what Lauren never expected. For all her obsession with detail, she treated money the way she treated people, useful when silent, inconvenient when it spoke back. 3 weeks after the wedding, the Langston estate accounting team finalized the internal event audit. The estate wasn't a public venue by default, but we had systems in place. Lauren had convinced the on-site coordinator, Jenna, to book it through a family rate, bypassing several standard fees using my name. She thought I wouldn't notice. She assumed my silence equaled consent. But Jenna was a professional. She logged everything. And when the time came to reconcile vendor credits and gratuities, the documents all led to one place: me. It wasn't even malicious. It was logistics. My company's event branch had handled the tent installation, lighting design, custom florals, guest transport. Every partner Lauren had worked with, they were mine. She just never asked what that meant. She never stopped to wonder why so many vendors said yes so quickly, or why every quote came in a little below market rate. She thought it was charm. It wasn't. It was leverage. Mine. The final invoice was 47 pages long. Every service rendered, every bottle opened, every overtime hour logged by staff. A polite cover letter explained that although the event had been processed as a personal family booking, the wedding had exceeded standard luxury capacity and would therefore trigger full estate pricing with a minor corporate discount. All vendor credits were annotated with the partner code, Langston Collective. The logo? My initials. Stylized in gold, bottom right corner of the first page, impossible to miss. Lauren received the invoice via email. I know because I was CC'd, standard accounting practice. I wasn't expecting a reply. But at 8:32 p.m. that night, my phone lit up with a new message. Subject: "Are you serious?" There was no greeting, no context, just a forwarded image of the bill and one line underneath it. "I thought we were family." I stared at those words longer than I expected. They didn't sting. Not anymore. They just felt empty, like an old password that no longer worked. I thought about responding. I even typed out a draft, something clean and final like, "You made that clear when you erased me from your photos." But I deleted it. I didn't need to explain myself to someone who had seen me as a resource, not a person. Instead, I forwarded the message to Marcus with a shrug emoji. He responded 2 minutes later with, "She thought she booked the vineyard. Turns out she only rented the chairs." That made me laugh. A real laugh. The first one in weeks. What Lauren hadn't understood was that I never needed revenge in the form of spectacle. I didn't want her humiliated. I just wanted clarity. And now she had it, in the form of a logo, a signature, and a bill with 5 zeros. What came next wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches or family interventions, just quiet distance. She never denied the bill. She never questioned the charges. She paid. I assume it wasn't from her personal account, probably Dad's or her new husband's. But that wasn't my concern. What mattered was that the transaction, like everything else that day, bore my name. 2 weeks later, Jenna told me that another bride, one who had been at the wedding as a guest, booked a spring ceremony and specifically requested me as a co-designer. "I want to work with the woman who doesn't need the microphone to be the main voice," she said. I accepted. I didn't send Lauren the confirmation. I didn't need to. But I knew she saw it. The bride tagged me in the post. My logo again. Gold, bottom right. Permanent. The photo sat on the mantle for weeks before I noticed it. A gift from my mother to Lauren, delivered the day after the wedding. Framed in ivory white matte finish wood with gold foil along the edge. The caption engraved into the base read, "A perfect day, a forever family." It showed them, Lauren, her new husband, my parents, and a dozen others, standing under the vineyard archway in coordinated blush tones. Everyone was laughing. The sunlight made their hair shimmer. It looked effortless, expensive, curated. But what struck me most was who wasn't in it. Me. I wasn't in the shot. I hadn't been asked to step in, and I hadn't realized at the time how purposeful that moment was. Looking at it later, the truth became unbearable in its simplicity. The wedding was never meant to include me. I had been invited to participate without presence, to serve without being seen. I had arranged the flowers they posed beside. I had designed the estate they celebrated on. And I had curated the experience they labeled as perfect. But in the one image they chose to frame forever, I had been cropped out, deliberately. I took a photo of the frame with my phone and archived it, not out of bitterness but as a reference, because what came next wasn't anger, it wasn't grief, it was clarity. 2 weeks later, I opened a sealed envelope from my attorney. Inside was confirmation. The Langston Estate Trust had been fully transferred to me, final and irrevocable. Along with the title, I now held full licensing rights to all design, branding, and operational decisions. In short, it was mine. Not in name only, but in execution. And with that authority, I decided to make one small but meaningful change. I reframed the narrative. The estate's main tasting room had long featured a collection of framed photographs showcasing past weddings, family gatherings, and vineyard milestones. Lauren's wedding was among them, a large print with a gold plaque beneath it that read, "The Langston Ceremony, June 2024. I removed it. In its place, I curated a new image, not of a bride or a couple, but of the land itself. A wide-angle shot taken during the golden hour, the vines in soft bloom, with the estate's gate just barely visible in the distance, where the bronze plaque bearing my name could be seen catching sunlight. The new inscription read, "Legacy isn't what they frame you in, it's what you plant that keeps growing." No one argued, no one asked, no one removed it. A month later, the Langston Estate was selected by a major event agency for a regional feature on women-owned luxury retreats. The writer emailed to ask if I'd like to provide a personal quote to accompany the spread. I sent her one sentence, "Some families plant roots in each other. I planted mine in the ground, and it bloomed without permission." The piece went viral, the estate's bookings tripled, my name trended on wedding TikTok. But what mattered most wasn't the attention. It was that every image, every event, every guest now walked through a place that held my name, not just legally, but spiritually. It was no longer the backdrop to someone else's story. It had become the canvas for my own. I didn't see Lauren again until Christmas. A quiet dinner at my parents' house. She wore a designer sweater and carried a box of macarons tied with gold ribbon. We didn't hug. We didn't fight. She didn't bring up the bill or the plaque or the sign or the article. She just looked at me and nodded once, slowly. I nodded back. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just recognition. And sometimes that's all a legacy requires. Later that night, I drove back to the estate and walked the vineyard alone. The stars were out. The winter chill clung to my jacket. I paused beneath the archway where they once posed for that photo, the one I was never meant to be in. And I smiled. Because in the quiet, the soil still held my name. The wind still whispered through the rows I had planted. The legacy had been reframed. And this time, I was standing in the center of it. This story is about more than revenge. It's about reclamation. Ava didn't destroy her sister, didn't yell, didn't burn bridges. She simply let the truth of her value speak louder than the silence they gave her. That's what makes this story powerful. It's a kind of revenge that doesn't shout, it echoes. And in doing so, it invites the audience to reflect. Where in my life have I accepted the background when I belonged in the frame? This is the kind of ending that doesn't just resolve a plot, it plants a feeling. Quiet, certain, unforgettable. If this story touched you, subscribe to Revenge with Seren, because some revenge needs no knives, no screaming, just one spotlight, one shining nameplate, and someone they once dismissed, rising, brilliant and unshaken. See you in the next story.